welcome to another episode of All Things Football. Today, we are very happy to welcome a man that not only brings us the latest football news from the Premier League on Premier League TV, but also has shared some tips with us on the FPL show. Danny, we only ever get to see you on television. It's a great pleasure to actually get to speak to you. Welcome to the show, my man.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. It should be an exciting one. Very, very excited to hear your insights as well and some of the questions that we do have. So just right off the bat, I mean, many of us dream of having the type of job that you have and that, you get to do and places you get to see. Just tell us a bit about how you got into football, and it's come to our understanding that you're actually a Wigan fan. When I think Wigan, I think about Roberto Martinez, I think about your FA Cup final triumph over Manchester City. So just tell us a bit about how you became a Wigan fan, and yeah, you can go ahead and kick it off.
Wigan is where I kind of grew up. I moved there with my family when I was sort of 7 or 8 years old, and it's my dad's side of the family are Scottish. So they support Rangers, and my mum's side were all Liverpool fans. My granddad was a season ticket holder at Liverpool for 30 or 40 years, but as I'm sure you know, quite expensive to go to Liverpool on a weekly basis. So we had some friends who went to Wigan every week when they were in what's now League One. So we started going there. It was £2, I think, for me when I was 11 or 12. And it's as soon as you start going to live football, you fall in love with it, right? And that's exactly what happened. And within 6 months, I think we got season tickets, and then it was a perfect time to get in because that team under Paul Jewell just skyrocketed, basically. Went into the Premier League and spent 8 great years there, culminating, as you say, in that incredible Saturday evening at Wembley, which remains probably my favourite memory of football, winning the FA Cup against Manchester City with Ben Watson's last-minute goal. It's been a little bit rough since, but hey, ups and downs of football, isn't it? And obviously I don't get to see them quite as much as I'd like to now, working almost every weekend of the season. But yeah, they still very much have a place in my heart.
In terms of you actually get into the football industry, Danny?
It was a tricky one. So I did geography at university, of all things, up in Liverpool, which is fairly useless in the real world, but it taught me how to waffle. And also, while I was there at Liverpool, there was a student radio society which I joined and really enjoyed it. And there was then a hospital radio station, which is a big breeding ground for broadcasters here in the UK. Lots and lots of people started a hospital radio station, which is literally, as it sounds, a radio station providing entertainment for people who are in hospital. And that was at Broad Green Hospital in Liverpool. There's a guy there who used to work for Radio City, which is the commercial radio station in Liverpool. And he was a big sports fan. We got on really well. And Paul, what his name was, he just kind of said, just if you want to try something, we'll figure out how to make it work. So we ended up doing that for a couple of years. I loved it and thought when I left university, this would be quite good fun to do as a job, I think. So I tried to do that. I ended up having to do a master's degree in sports broadcasting in Staffordshire and Stoke. And then from there, just bombarded every single production company in Britain with CVs and cover letters and everything. Eventually, one of them gave me a shot, and that ended up leading me to a company called IMG that make the Premier League TV stuff that you watch there in South Africa. And from there, did a few years as an assistant producer, making all the videos and things that you see on screen. And then just so happened that they had what they called a short form content department that they were creating, which was all the sort of short online kind of videos. And they needed somebody to kind of host them, and I'd always fancied it, so I thought, I'll put my name forward, and they liked it, and yeah, here I am now. It's a whole lot of luck involved, unfortunately, and a lot of not taking no for an answer, but it's once you get the opportunity, you just got to grasp it with both hands, and I'd like to think that's what I've managed to do.
Danny, so you mentioned your journey there, but tell us, in terms of the last, say, 12 to 18 months, obviously we know what's happened in terms of the world, the pandemic and so on. How has that impacted your career?
Well, there's probably two main ways. The first one purely on like on a personal for me level. I decided to go freelance in sort of February last year. Great timing, eh? So I ended up doing that in May, which was right in the middle of our first lockdown here. So it wasn't the greatest of timings, but you know, luckily football continued eventually, and then I suppose that leads on to the second way it changed things. We were doing a lot of broadcasting from home. So I was, you know, broadcasting we did Fan Zone. We carried on doing that from basically this room. And then once we were allowed to get back out to stadiums and things, it was very, very different, obviously. Of course it's going to be. But really, it adapted pretty quickly, I think. And I'd like to think that the quality of broadcasting that was done for the Premier League and beyond once the pandemic was really, was really in the background and we were concentrating on actually bringing the matches to people were still as good as before COVID times. Obviously, it's meant that we don't have as much sort of one-on-one time with players and managers and things. It's all done either over Zoom or from 2 meter distance away. But look, things happen, don't they? You have to adapt and change with the times, and I think we've managed to just about get over that. And hopefully, it sounds like things are going back to a little bit more of normality next month when the Premier League season starts again. So hopefully we can get a little bit further back to how it used to be.
And
yeah, I think it is anything that COVID has taught us is that we in this real constant change, and in this era where we're dealing with not only so much change and the state of flux, but we really it tests our adaptability to this particular change. And just also talking about change, Danny. Of course, there's change at football club level as well. There's changes in the dugout, changes on the pitch. With change, we've seen some managerial appointments. I mean, Rafa to Everton. We've seen Bruno Lage to Wolves, Nuno going to Spurs, and one that's actually going to intrigue me is Patrick Vieira off to Crystal Palace, because I was following him in France, and he didn't have the best of times over there. How do you think these managerial appointments will affect the respective clubs, and especially for Vieira being completely new to management almost? How do you think he's going to take to the Premier League? Because of course, being a Premier League legend of a player in comparison to being a manager, two completely different ballgames.
Yeah, it's no guarantee, is it? I'm glad you said that Vieira was the most interesting one for you, because it is for me as well, particularly because Crystal Palace is probably the biggest rebuilding job in the Premier League this season, just because of how many players they had out of contract. So there's going to be a big turnover in how many players are there this season from last. But from what I can gather, Vieira is very highly regarded as a coach. That's what he did very well within the City football group. Part of his career when he was at Manchester City with their development squad. And the first couple of years in France went relatively well. And then I think it tailed off quite quickly towards the end of his third year there. But what interests me particularly is some of the players that they've bought. Michael Olise, who they bought from Reading, is a heck of a footballer. He's a really, really interesting player. I think he could be one to get very excited about. He was in the Championship with Reading last year and looks an absolute superstar. And Mark Guehi as well from Chelsea that they bought. He could very easily be one of these that Chelsea buy back in 4 or 5 years for £80 million instead of the 15 I think that they've sold him for. It's a complete unknown, isn't it, with Crystal Palace? They're a great club. They're really, really good to work with. Sellers Park is just a fantastic stadium to watch football at. So I hope he does well. In terms of the other ones, I mean, we kind of know, I guess, what to expect from Nuno and what to expect from Rafa. We've seen them in the Premier League before. Though both of those I don't think are necessarily easy jobs. Rafa maybe more so because of his history at Liverpool. But we've seen him in that situation before, right? When he took over at Chelsea. I mean, the Chelsea fans didn't take to him because of his Liverpool background, and he did pretty well. He won the Europa League that year, so he's very good at drowning out the noise around him. Is what Rafa Benitez is good at, and he's obviously a fantastic technical coach. He will improve the players that he has. And I think you can say the same about Nuno as well. Spurs have a fantastic squad. I think hopefully they keep hold of Harry Kane, which will make his job a lot easier. But yeah, they've made a couple of interesting signings already. I think he might do all right there. And the one we've not mentioned is probably the one that I know least about. Bruno Lage is at Wolves. He was pretty much an unknown, I guess, for a lot of football fans in England, although he has good pedigree back in Portugal. But this is the kind of thing that we've come to expect from Wolves and their ownership. They go down this kind of route, and they've got a really fun collection of attacking players, I think, at Wolves, with Daniel Podence and Pedro Neto and Adama Traore, of course, if they can keep hold of him. The tools are there for them to go back to what we saw 2 years ago rather than what we saw last year, especially with Raul Jimenez back as well, which is great to see him back in action the other week.
Danny, when you mention players, I always take note because I think it was a season or two ago you mentioned, watch out for Reece James. He's going to go on to big things. And well, it wasn't too long later that
it didn't take long, did it?
Yeah, it didn't take too long. So I've already made a note of the names you mentioned because you seem to be quite good at that. But yeah, it's interesting to see how things are going to pan out. But what I'm obviously interested in, many fans is the top four. Do you see any change in that, seeing that there are lots of teams who are aspiring to be in the top four, but do they have what it takes to break that from last season?
It's very difficult to see too much change. I think Manchester City are still obviously the team to beat.
Yeah.
Liverpool will have some fit centre-backs this year, which will help them immeasurably. Manchester United will almost certainly be better and closer to the top than they were last year. Chelsea, after a full summer with Thomas Tuchel, I imagine will be basically what we saw in the last 6 months of last year. And then you've got Leicester City, who have recruited very, very cleverly. Brendan Rodgers again is an excellent manager. I think he's finally getting some of the respect that he probably has deserved more of. I think it will probably be four from those five, and it just depends if one of those big four, as it were, in City, United, Liverpool, and Chelsea, if any of those slip off, Leicester will be there to pounce. And I think Leicester are a lot closer to those four than maybe they are to Spurs and Arsenal, who are to certain degrees rebuilding and trying to get back up to that level. Those will probably be the top seven, but whether the top four changes too much, I can't really see it right now. Obviously, we've got a lot of time for it to change, but I think it'll be four from those five, if I had to guess.
I just want to find out your opinion as well, Danny, on Arsenal and Mikel Arteta. I mean, they've tailed off quite badly, and a lot of people had very high expectations for Arteta. I read in the week that Granit Xhaka might be on his way to join Jose Mourinho at Roma as well. Of course, last season we saw Bukayo Saka really step up. We saw Emile Smith-Rowe do phenomenally well when the more senior players were unable to really take the mantle and lead the team forward. What's your opinion of Arteta, and how do you foresee Arsenal doing this coming season?
I think they'll improve. I was working on Arteta's very first game in charge, which was on Boxing Day at Bournemouth. I interviewed him before and afterwards, and he's a really impressive football mind when you talk to him. And it was interesting watching that day. I think it was Saka played left back, I think, that day. I can't remember exactly who it was. It might well have been Saka. Someone played left back that wasn't a left back. And it was incredible watching him. Arteta was on the touchline, almost talking him through exactly where he needed to be and where to pass the ball. It was amazing how much knowledge he was imparting on him. And that's the Pep Guardiola influence, I guess. Yeah. They're very similar in that kind of intensity. And then when he's flicking between English, Spanish, French, a bit of Italian here and there, all just within the same kind of same stream of consciousness instructions to his players, is really impressive. But like you say, I think the young players that they have at Arsenal, I mean, it's frightening really to think how good Bukayo Saka could be, given he's only 19. My heart broke for him when he missed that penalty in the final a couple of weeks ago. He's a heck of a footballer, and I imagine if the idea will be kind of to turn the entire team over to the young kids, right? To build the team around Saka, to build the team around Smith Rowe, who is an excellent footballer as well. And I think if they do that, there'll be a few growing pains, obviously. Always happens when you blood a load of young players. But I think Arteta, again, is a very good coach. He's a very good moulder of footballers, which he's picked up with his time at City and the managers that he's worked under. So I imagine they will be better. Obviously, they have a little bit of work to do because they're maybe in transition a little bit between getting rid of some of the players that have been there a little while and getting these younger players up to speed. But I think Arsenal could be, I'm not sure they'll challenge, certainly not for the title, maybe not for the top four, but I think we'll see signs that they are getting back to the Arsenal that we know from 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned Gabriel Martinelli, who's also a fantastic young footballer.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. Following Balogun as well. I think he's just signed a new contract, hasn't he? Everybody who follows Arsenal, he's the one that people say this kid's going to be good. I think he's only 18 or 19 years old, so we could probably see him in the Premier League before too long.
Absolutely. So, Danny, also for me, where I first remember seeing you was on the fantasy football program. And I used to take a lot of pointers from there. Obviously, as time went on, I learned to play with my gut. And FPL is one of those games that makes you want to pull your hair out when things don't go your way and rejoice when things do go your way. Do you still play FPL? And what sort of tips would you have for people who want to do well in the upcoming season?
I mean, the biggest tip I can give is continue watching those videos from official FPL because they're I might not do them anymore, but they're still just as good, and the people behind them know what they're talking about. But in terms of general tips, you just got to keep on top of it. That's genuinely the easiest way to improve how you do is just pay attention to it, because a lot of people, by the time you get to October, November, December, have either forgotten about it or won't be paying as much weekly attention to it. Just try and keep on top of team news and follow as many teams as you can, just to work out who fans of that team are being impressed by, because that can be the difference. Like if you're trying to follow 20 teams, you've not got a chance. But if you can piggyback off the supporters of Crystal Palace or the supporters of Brentford, they're watching their team every week. They're going to know who's impressing, who's maybe not scoring the goals that they should do. That's one of the easiest ways to kind of get the inside track. And the other one is delve into statistics a little bit. There's loads and loads of things out there where lots of Twitter accounts that break down statistics. There's things like Football Reference as well, which is very good, which has a lot of more sort of advanced kind of statistics. But familiarize yourself with those. There's a lot that can help you out. And yeah, I guess they're probably the two key things, because they're the sort of things that the vast majority of people that are playing, like your mates in your mini leagues, they're not doing that. So if you want to get your inside track, that's the way. And look, trust the process, right? If you do things right, you'll get the results from it.
Yeah, I know one mate that would be following, and that's the guy sitting on the other side of the camera, and that's Wasim. For the last two seasons, we've been basically jostling each other. And fortunately, I'm going to go on a bit of a brag here. I just managed to pip him this season. So I was lucky. On the last day of the season, I actually went ahead. I took a bit of a chance. He was leading me. I brought Sadio Mane in, and I captained him, and it paid off. So yeah, it's a lot about luck as well.
Oh, of course it is. But you make your own luck sometimes, You make your own luck. I think it was 2 years ago, I was at the top of the Premier League Productions League. Second behind me was the guy who used to produce the fantasy show, Sean Creamer, who is one of the very best FPL managers. He's won it. I think he won it 6 of the previous 7 years. Wow. I think I had a 20-point gap or something, but I still had my wild card. So I was like, do I just copy Sean's team? Do I go evil, or do I, play it properly? In the end, I played it properly and it paid off. I ended up beating him and won it. But yeah, so you just got to do what you got to do sometimes, haven't you?
The biggest thing with regards to fantasy is always do you go with 11 star players, the best you can get in terms of the money, and then fill your team with cheap guys? Or do you go with 15 players who are going to play regularly, and then you swap them out depending on who they're playing, who's injured, and things like that? So it's always a tricky one, but I think, as you say, follow your gut, and you'll always go the right way.
If you follow your gut, you can't blame anybody else, right? If you copy somebody else's decisions, then it's their fault. Follow what's in there, and if it goes wrong, then it's only yourself to blame.
Absolutely. And then Danny, you mentioned how your heart broke for Bukayo Saka missing the penalty against Italy. I think England were fantastic in this Euro. Before the tournament, what were your prospects for them? Did you ever envisage them getting to the final? Because I remember reading and seeing Gary Neville say that the minimum that he expects of England is to make a final, and I can remember coming across it and thinking, wow, he's really probably overestimating England, but you guys are fantastic in the Euro. What are your prospects for next year's World Cup as well? Surely you guys are among the favourites.
Well, I mean, no matter how good our team is, we always seem to be among the favourites. I'm not quite sure why, but it's interesting when we had our last kind of debacle of not qualifying for Euro 2008 and then being awful in South Africa in 2010. There was a big kind of a big review went on in English football, and the guy who was in charge of our FA at the time targeted 2022, the World Cup, to be the one that he wanted England to win. And it's interesting that it's almost tallied up, like the plan has effectively worked. Going into this summer, I plotted out who was likely to be in the knockout phase, right? And you looked at our route was probably going to be something like Germany in the round of 16. Then it was going to be, say, France in the quarterfinals, Spain in the semi-finals, and then Belgium in the final. Now, if you look at that route, before the tournament, I don't think England would have been, in my head, the favourites for any of those 4 games. As it happened, it turned out Germany weren't very good, and then we played like Ukraine and the Denmark in the semi-finals. It turned out we were the favourites for all 3 of those. So before the tournament, I probably would have said quarter-final, semi-final would have been a good tournament as long as there was progression, because it's it was the youngest team in the competition, the England squad. But the way it worked out, yeah, we probably should have got to the final, and I still think we probably should have won the final. But sometimes football doesn't work that way, and sadly, Italy are a little bit more streetwise and a little bit more. They seem like they knew that they were going to do us on penalties. I think pretty early on. We've still got that thing in our heads, English football fans, with penalties. We don't like them. We don't rate them. But it's a shame that Gareth Southgate, I think, who I just adore. I think he's fantastic. He's the leader that this country needs at the moment. I think he got everything pretty much spot on in every single game, at every single point, up until the final, where in the first 15 minutes of the second half, just before Italy scored their equaliser, I think England had something like 15% possession. He should have changed something there, and he didn't. Sadly, with hindsight, I'm sure he would have altered something and tried to win it within 90 minutes. But that was the only decision I think he got wrong. And it's awful that the 2 players that ended up being blamed for the 3 players that ended up being blamed for missing really don't deserve it, because all 3 of them had their moments in the tournament.
Danny, just before we wrap things up, I want to talk about Wigan, obviously a club that you love. When I look at them, I remember them being in the Premier League and doing so well. I think they finished 7th at one stage. How are things looking in terms of the season ahead? You sort of went through a very bad spell in terms of administration. How are things looking for the upcoming season? Is there a chance to see you in the Championship, perhaps in the not too distant future?
Yeah, that's the aim. As you rightly said, we 2 years ago, after the COVID break, for some reason, and it's still very unclear, that the previous owners decided to put the club into administration in strange circumstances that nobody seems to understand. That ended up with them being relegated because of the points deduction. that you're given for administration, despite being the best team in the championship for the last second half of the season. Then last year was very tricky. But when you go into administration, there's a lot of restrictions on how many players you're allowed to have. So it was a very young, thrown together squad that did very well to stay up in League One. But they've been taken over by a group from Bahrain, who they're saying all the right things. They're investing in the squad. They've brought in a guy called Charlie Wyke, who was one of the top scorers in League One last year from Sunderland. Max Power, who is there on my wall. That was one of the last times we were in League One when we won it. That was his celebration with the flair on the pitch. He's come back. So everything seems to be trending in the right direction. The difficulty is League One is just a horrible division to get out of. It's so tight. The difference in quality from the top to the bottom is very small, and there are some big clubs left. Ipswich is still in League One, Portsmouth, Sunderland, as I said. There's a lot of really big teams, all that want to go up. So it's going to be very tricky. I know they are one of the favourites now to get promotion, but I wouldn't put money on it this season just because of how the squad's having to be built up from nothing. But look, things are going in the right direction, which is after the last couple of years is a good thing. And the people in charge seem to know what they're doing. They're good football people. They've got a lot of experience in the game. So I think a lot of Wigan fans are feeling very positive. And look, their stated aim is to get them back to the Championship and then put them in a position to get back into the Premier League. But that's the case for probably 40 of the 92 teams in the football in the English football division. So look, I'm feeling positive, and to be quite honest, after some of the times last year, I think we're all just glad that we've got a club that exists to support, quite frankly.
Absolutely. I mean, it takes you back to the situation at Bury as well. The club folded, unfortunately, and one of those old clubs that really don't want to see folding, like you rightfully said. There's so many big clubs in League One. I mean, I look at the Championship and I counted the amount of teams that were actually in the Premier League era, and it's quite astounding that maybe 2 or 3 haven't been in the Premier League. So they're all big clubs. And for the likes of Wigan, who spent multiple seasons in the Premier League, Sunderland, Portsmouth, I hope as a football fan is to always see them get back into the Premier League. So, good luck to Wigan and all those clubs. And then as we wrap up, Danny, for people and fans that do want to, follow you and watch some of your content, where can we get hold of you on social media?
Oh yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Danny Jamieson. I'm on Instagram as well, Danny Jamieson 14. And yeah, I'll be on your screens. BT Sport, I think, a lot this season. We do Match Pack as well, which I think you guys get down there in South Africa, which is a statistical preview to the weekend. That should be good for any fantasy players out there. And yeah, fingers crossed there'll be some more things coming pretty soon.
Absolutely. So for guys watching this as well, be sure to catch up to speed with Danny and to follow some of his content. And for ourselves, of course, you can catch us on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter as well. Danny, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, as it always is with everyone that we do have. Like I said, we only ever get to see you guys on television, so to have this interaction with you is phenomenal. Thank you so much for giving us your time and for making time to come on and join us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, you're very, very welcome, guys. Really enjoyed it. So thanks for having me on, and stay safe out there.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Take care. Cheers.